You know, when people usually rip off a story, they don't own the rights to that story. But Amazon is a special kind of stupid, so stupid that The Rings of Power is basically a Lord of the Rings remake. I know you're not supposed to bury the lead, but you really need to experience the revelation in the moment. So let's go through this episode, and when we get to the ripoff section, make sure to keep something soft in your hand so you don't hurt yourself when you facepalm. The episode starts with Arondir and the orcs. They've captured him and the other elves from the watchtower and put them to work digging a cloth-covered trench. This is because the orcs hate the sunlight. Are you listening, Warner Brothers Entertainment? The orcs hate the sunlight, so they avoid being in it, not prancing around uncovered at noon under a cloudless sky. Maybe you should think about that for the next Shadow of Whatever game. Now, it appears the Watchtower elves never noticed this trench and got caught, which raises questions about how capable any of them are. We already know they can't handle a snow troll when there's 7 of them. Apparently they can't handle orcs either, and lost their keen eyesight that lets them see miles further than any men. You think I'm being petty, but when you see how much of the forest the orcs cut down, the elves have to have been blind to miss this. Then it cuts to Strong Woman and Discount Aragorn. Strong Woman wakes up and realizes her knife is gone, because that's all she actually cares about. They go to the deck and meet Elendil, who has a knife, and who dances around where his ship is headed when asked by Strong Woman. It's strange that she doesn't know, because there can only be one place in the west, Numenor. She then admits this when they pass into the island's port, and Discount Aragorn asks where they are. But it's strange that he doesn't know, because Numenor is said to have created colonies across the shores of Middle-earth down to the Southlands, where he's from, so it makes little sense that he wouldn't know who these people were, unless Amazon thoroughly jacked up the timeline. I'm sure that didn't happen. At any rate, we finally get to see where Amazon put their money, because Numenor looks beautiful. It's not just the wide shots of the city, but also the sets, with real people on them. This is exactly what I thought it looked like, except for all the blue. That gives it too much of a Greek feel. I always imagined it had burnt umber accents, but that's a nitpick. Numenor was based on the Atlantis myth, so Amazon isn't entirely wrong in using Greco-Roman elements. I think they could have dialed it back a touch, maybe thrown in some Spanish elements just so it isn't so on the nose, or used more of the Jackson film Gondorian designs they're pretending they aren't using. But overall, other than the blue, it's perfect. The costuming, not so much. It's very generic. You can't really tell them apart from the elven clothes, short of the colors they use. It's just bland, quasi-medieval Greco-Roman clothes. The fact that Strong Woman and Discount Aragorn don't even look out of place is a testament to this poor design choice. The Numenorians are a seafaring people and have this star-shaped island. Those 2 motifs should be everywhere in the costuming. Setting that aside, we get a little bit of info in this scene. Strong Woman explains that these men are different from Discount Aragorn. They were given the island as a gift, and were once close with the elves but have cut off contact and no one knows why. Well, that's not true. In the books, the Numenorians didn't hide why they turned. They were jealous of the elves' immortality, and openly spoke out against the elves and the Valar. They also didn't remain in Numenor. As I said before, they established colonies on the eastern shores of Eriador as far south as Umbar, which is just south of what would become the realm of Gondor. The Eldar weren't aware of everything the Numenorians did, but it would have been impossible for the elves to be ignorant of the colonies in the north, so they would have encountered those Numenorians and heard about the reason why they cut off contact. This is particularly key because in the books, Gil-galad reaches out to one of the Numenorian kings in the 800s to warn about Sauron. This establishes how close the relationship was. It was so close that on the western parts of the island, the Teleri elves from the island of Tol Eressëa would regularly visit. This is why those who lived in the west made up the majority of those who remained loyal to the Valar. They were called the Faithful. I'm telling you this because the show doesn't. This contrived plot point about no one knowing why Numenor broke off contact with the Eldar doesn't need to be there. It doesn't create any tension, and it doesn't even suit the story. It's just there, kind of like the scene with Queen Bee. Shall I belabor the point that it makes no sense that the Numenorians are multiracial when they're supposed to be Edain, and all the Edain were described as essentially Caucasian by Tolkien? And for the people who will say that the Numenorians sailed the world and brought back immigrants or something to that effect, technically that's not true, and in just a moment you're going to see how far away Numenor is from the other continents, making that claim damn near impossible. Instead, it's better to point out that in the books, Miriel doesn't become queen until Pharazôn usurps the throne after her father Tar-Palantir dies, and he forcibly marries her. The only reason I can see for changing this is to have another woman in a position of power in the show, but it's going to cause a major plot problem when Pharazôn takes over, because if Tar Palantir is still loyal to the Valar, it would make sense for people to assume Miriel is too, and therefore not want her to rule. At minimum, there should be some suspicion about her, so that you can justify why people would accept her now but suddenly turn against her. Anyway, Strong Woman continues to be an insufferable twat. I don't know why they wrote her this way, but she just picks fights just to do it. Queen Bee asks for their names, Strong Woman gives her titles, and then asks for passage to Middle-earth. Barzan chimes in to say that this hasn't been done for the elves in generations, and Strong Woman claps back saying that it's because of the elves that they have the island nation to begin with. Queen Bee corrects her, and Strong Woman is like, I'm getting off this island one way or another. Why is she so pissy? Just a few moments before, she said that she had no idea why the Númenóreans cut off ties with the elves. She's been stared at by the natives since she arrived, but nothing to justify snapping at the queen. What is she so upset about when none of them have done anything to her? Remember, we're supposed to like Strong Woman and believe that she will become Galadriel. Nothing about this scene sounds anything like Galadriel. And even if the writers thought that making her arrogant made her strong, there's a way to do that without making her unlikable. So it's up to Viscount Aragorn to smooth things over, which he does in a way that suggests to those who are familiar with the lore that he might be Sauron, since he was a sweet talker in his Onatar form. He buys them 3 days, which Strong Woman doesn't like. Viscount Aragorn also stops Elendil to give him a hug, but it's really to steal back Strong Woman's knife, which he does in full view of everyone, somehow hides it on his person for about a minute, and then gives it back to Strong Woman with the queen looking right at them, and yet she does nothing because I guess bitch can have the knife back. Then it cuts to Isildur in the middle of a training exercise on the sea. There's some dude playing a half-assed drill sergeant, shouting random, supposedly clever lines that Isildur isn't listening to because he's too busy staring at Númenor. Then a female voice calls his name. Good luck trying to figure out what that's supposed to mean because there's nothing in the episode to explain it. I mean, Peter Jackson did something similar with the One Ring in his films, but there is no ring yet, so what's calling Isildur? Is it the island? Is it the white tree Nimloth? There's lore about him saving the seed from the tree when it's cut down, and that's how we get the White Tree of Gondor. Who knows? Anyway, he gets called back into reality just in time to help some boy not get thrown into the sea. And when they get back to the shore, we get one of the most idiotic lines in the show. I try not to remember them, but this one is so retarded I have to share it. The drill sergeant has them shout the phrase, "The sea is always right." Is that supposed to be their version of "You know nothing, Jon Snow"? Are we meant to say this like it's cool? 'Cause no, don't say that line. If you say that line around any living creature, they have the right to slap you. Twice. It is known, Khaleesi. Fortunately, we are excused from this stupidity by 2 very nice things brought by Isildur's non-existent sister, Aryen. Look at the screen and you'll see what I'm talking about. I have no idea what they said in the scene. It doesn't really matter. This is glorious. Enjoy it because it's the last beautiful thing you're going to see in the episode. Then we get the shot of Nimloth, the white tree of Númenor. Queen Bee says that the faithful believe that the tree is a reminder that the Valar's eyes and judgment are still on Númenor. That's very poetic, but I have a question. Who are the faithful? Is she talking about the Valar? The Eldar? The Ilúvatar? Who is she talking about? This is just thrown out there like we're supposed to know, but there's nothing in the show explaining this in any detail. The writers give a half-assed explanation later in the show. However, the tension of this scene, specifically the accusation Queen Bee makes, rests on knowing that she's referring to the Númenóreans who still love the elves and the Valar, and that they're a minority. Too much of the show banks on people knowing the backstory, and that's terrible writing because it leaves most of the people watching the show confused. They have no idea what you're talking about. Queen Bee asks the meaning of Elendil's name. One meaning is a lover of stars, the other is elf friend, and she asks if he is an elf friend, which he quickly denies. She tells him that helping Strong Woman is treason, and Elendil pleads his case, resulting in Queen Bee giving him a new charge along with a sword. We then get this map shot they've used many times to show where things are, and I'm only showing it to demonstrate how far away Númenor is from the rest of Middle-earth. It's further from the coast of Eriador than the Shire is from Mordor. There is simply no way anybody who looks black or Asian in the world of Ardo would be in Númenor. It is folly. Anyway, it cuts back to Arondir, and we get a good look at the orcs this time around, and they look awesome. They basically look the same way they did in the Jackson films, but this time they're all white. Did you think no one would notice? Ironically, that's not what Peter Jackson did. He was all for diversity. He had orcs of many different skin tones, from black to brown to red to gray to Harvey Weinstein. Amazon, though, just white. So much for that diversity, huh? Are all the villains going to be white? That's a rhetorical question. I know the answer is yes. Anywho, Arondir and the other elves plot to get away. If just one of them can make it to the tree line, they can call for others and return in force, and this is from the show, sweep the enemy from these lands like salt from a table. Yes, because when you think badass, you think of someone spilling salt on a table and wiping it off. I've never heard that one before. You know they were thinking about that line from Two Towers. I will draw you, Saruman, as poison is drawn from a wound. But this was the best they could do. Salt from a table. Whoever managed to get through the table reading without pissing themselves laughing deserves a bonus, because I wouldn't have made it. Back to the orcs, they start yelling about the elves tearing down this tree. The old elf, who shouldn't even be a thing, says they should go around, but the orcs want to cut it down. The old elf argues that the tree has earned its right to live and almost gets beaten for it until the head orc shows up and says the old elf has spunk and gives him some water to drink. Turns out to be legit, so the old elf drinks, passes it to Arondir, who passes it to his old college buddy. As dude takes a drink, the orc slits his throat. So sad. So tragic that his poor friend... Shit, I actually don't know his name. Maybe the writer should have made him a more important character and, I don't know, mentioned his name. That probably would have helped me care that he's dead. So, because this dude dies, Arondir agrees to cut down the tree. He climbs out of the trench, and now we can see how much of the forest the orcs cut down and how long this trench is. Somehow, the far-seeing, ever-perceptive elves missed this. If only Strong Woman had been there, she'd have already known. This goes on for miles. What is the point of having a watchtower if you're not watching for shit like this? It would help if we knew how far away this was from the watchtower, because that might explain why the elves missed it, but that would make sense, and this isn't that kind of show. For example, Strong Woman keeps escaping and winds up at the docks. Elendil is waiting for her and tells her she'll never make it out of the port. She says she'll try her luck, and he says he'll call her handlers. Instead of trying to massage the situation, Strong Woman gets pissy and threatens to kill him if he talks. Then she talks down to him, asking, "Who is this mortal who speaks to me as if he has the slightest idea of who I am?" I don't know, the guy who compares you to his barely adult children? He says that he has a daughter who runs fast and a son who runs blind, and Strong Woman's eyes bear a resemblance to both. Strong Woman is at least 2,000 years old at this point, well past her youth and elf years, but she's acting like a bratty little kid, which is why she changes the subject, pouts, and walks away. Elendil then speaks in Elvish, which surprises her, and he mentions that Elvish is still spoken in some places in Numenor, used in their Hall of Laws, and is inscribed all over their monuments. Strong Woman asks about this Hall of Laws, which Elendil says is but a day's ride away, to which Strong Woman says, "Did you say ride?" And we get the slowest slow motion scene I've ever seen of this bitch riding an albino horse. And of course, we only see her. Who cares about Elendil? He's not important. No, let's watch this woman grin at the pace of growing grass. So creepy. Speaking of creepy, Discount Aragorn tries to talk his way into a blacksmith shop and just won't take no for an answer. The blacksmith explains that Discount Aragorn needs a certain badge to be able to work, so he sets about getting one by irritating the other blacksmiths. One comes over to his table and harasses him for freeloading, claiming he's taken all their food and drink, and Discount Aragorn adds in, "and your women," which gets the other blacksmiths to come over. The scene then gets quiet as it looks like Discount Aragorn is about to snap, but instead he sweet talks them, buying drinks for everyone. Where he got the money to do this, because it's not likely whatever currency is used in Middle-earth would be good on isolated Numenor, who knows. He uses this distraction to steal a badge from the harasser, but the dude notices and confronts Discount Aragorn in the alleyway, where they try to rough him up, but he commits to whooping their asses instead. One of the guys manages to get away and alert the guards, and Discount Aragorn winds up behind bars. Back to Strong Woman and Elendil, they arrive at the Hall of Laws, which were apparently built by Elros himself. And wouldn't you know, the hall has been graced with a picture of him. It is imperative that you look at the screen, because this is real. This is from the show. This is real. I think I know what they were trying to do, but damn. Elrond and Elros are twins. They look nothing alike. The art style matches nothing from any medieval culture at all. They had a $250 million budget, and this is what they painted. They had legendary Tolkien artist John Howe working on the show and didn't have him paint the picture. They could have gotten any well-known Tolkien artist to paint this. Or is that what they did, but didn't give them enough time to finish? Because none of the artists I know would make something that looks like this. Anyway, Elendil says that the last king is the only reason the Hall of Laws still stands, and it turns out that he's loyal to the elves and was forced to abdicate the throne. He spends his time locked up in a tower. That's not what happens in the books. Like I mentioned before, Tar Palantir reigns until his death. Although he's loyal to the Valar, most of the Númenóreans aren't, so he spends his time in the tower hoping to see the elven island Tol Eressëa, but he can't. When he dies, Miriel is supposed to become the queen, but Farazan usurps her and takes her as his wife, which is against the law because they're first cousins. Now, when they got to the hall, Elendil asks the librarian about the symbol Strong Woman found at Sauron's fort. Dude comes back with a book containing a similar symbol. Turns out that the symbol wasn't really a symbol, or the Great Eye as I thought, but a map of Mordor. And conveniently, the Hall of Laws has a map of southern Middle-earth right below the jacked-up painting. There's also a plan written in black speech that details how Mordor was to be a place where evil could not only endure, but thrive. This was a backup plan in case Morgoth was defeated. Well, in the books, that's not what happens. Morgoth created the mountain range in the First Age. Shelob lived there first, and Sauron came there in year 1000 of the Second Age. There was no plan. He just took over the place, built Barad-dûr, and then eventually forged the One Ring. It doesn't make any sense to change this because it creates a new problem, namely the elves being completely blind and stupid. How in the hell are they missing all this? Remember, they're searching for Sauron and the orcs. All of them were in the west and eventually moved east, implying the elves would encounter some of them as they moved east. In the books, this is avoided because at the time, Sauron is playing Onotar, winning over all who will listen to him. He only goes east when he's ready to make his ring. The show has seemingly reversed this so that the dark forces are already amassed. So when, or better yet, if Sauron shows up as Onotar, shouldn't the elves be suspicious of this mystery man offering gifts? Or is the show going to have it that only Strong Woman knows the truth and everyone ignores her warnings? This is the strangest thing about this show. It's changing things for no reason. It's not helping the story. It's causing plot problems where there were not. It's made worse by the show doing a poor job of explaining the world and the status quo, resulting in people having no clue what anyone is talking about. Ironically, House of the Dragon does a similar thing with compressing the timeline, but it doesn't have anywhere near the level of problems the Rings of Power does. That's a testament to the quality of writing and planning on the show, and the shocking lack of it for the Rings of Power. How else do you explain what the show does to the hobbits? First, we get this Wicker Man scene of them prancing around in creepy costumes chanting the phrase, "Nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone." We're gonna find out that's a lie. Second, we find out how cruel the hobbits are. Nori's dad is still injured and his wife fears that they will be left behind because the dad can't carry the cart. So in just one scene, it went from nobody walks alone to fuck them niggas. You would leave an injured man and his family to fend for themselves because he's too hurt to carry his own cart? How libertarian. How do you keep this group together if it's every man for himself? There's no safety in numbers if you abandon people the moment they have a problem. At any rate, when night falls, Nori tries to go into Lenny Henry's cart to get the Book of Stars so she can figure out what constellations Meteor Man showed her. However, her friend stops her, and they argue over whether to help Meteor Man. The friend is against it, and again, I must point out that their community is based around safety in numbers and supposedly helping each other, but this doesn't apply to strangers. Well, then I have a question. How did your group become multiracial? Because that's not how people evolve. Y'all would have come from different tribes and then joined together. Wouldn't that kind of get rid of some of your biases so you'd be willing to help a lost, confused old man? Apparently not. The friend wants to leave him behind so he can walk alone. But Nori persists and threatens to rat out her friend over some prank she did. Nori goes into the cart and finds the loose pages she needs, but Lenny Henry comes in and fumbles around, almost finding Nori until her friend talks him away, and I swear this is right out of a Cosby episode. Nori packs up the pages and leaves them in her bag on a stump and then joins the others for a remembrance of those who fell behind. And my first thought was, oh my god, are you actually talking about the people you ditched instead of helped? However, it turns out that's not what this is. It's people who died from accidents along the way. One of these accidents, a landslide, killed all of Nori's friends' family. It's a touching moment, ruined by the callousness of their laws. Here's what happens. Meteor Man comes into the camp and finds Nori's bag. He goes through the papers and seems to find one that shows the stars he was looking for. He stands over a fire so he can read the pages better. However, the papers catch fire, and in trying to put them out, Meteor Man stumbles into the remembrance and calls for Nori. So now Nori is in trouble for stealing and lying, and while Lenny Henry admits Meteor Man's arrival in the meteor is strange, Nori still broke the rules. Nori argues that she just wanted to help him and that he's her friend, and she's told by one of the busybodies that they don't need friends, they need to survive. Right. Well, what the fuck do you call this caravan? Are these not your friends? Your family? Are they nothing to you? Nori says that if they don't need friends, then what are they surviving for? Which is a valid point. She goes on to complain about their way of life, and the mother says that this way of living has kept them alive for 1,000 years. Well, now we know how much Amazon jacked up the timeline because the hobbits are counted among the race of men, and men first awoke in the first age. The first age lasts for 590 years, and Strong Woman implied in the prologue that we're not that far into the second age, meaning we're at least 410 years into that age, making no time for all these different races and ethnic groups to evolve, let alone the hobbits or Druidine, who are both descended from men. If more time has passed, that needs to be made clear. As for the diverse hobbits, I have a question. If they've migrated in this collective which is hostile to outsiders, how in the fuck are they still different races? They're not letting in new people, so they could only be mated among this group. How in the hell do they maintain distinct races when they've been inbreeding for 1,000 years? Did you see that viral post about the baseball player whose dad is black and married a white woman? And then the son also married a white woman, so their daughter looks white? Yeah, that's how little time it takes. 2 generations, mono race. Did no one think about what happens when you race mix for 1,000 years? Well, allow me to blaxplain. If most of the hobbits are white, and in the show they are, then after 1,000 years, everybody would look white. They wouldn't even know that there have been people of other races in the group. Anyway, the punishment for breaking the rules is to be decaravaned, meaning they throw the people out, presumably take all their stuff, and leave them to fend for themselves. Yes, that sounds exactly like the hobbits, who were known for their kind disposition and pity for others. Lenny Henry talks this decaravanning thing down, but still imposes a punishment. Nori's family will be placed at the back of the caravan, which Nori's mother says is no different than putting their name in the book. In other words, they're being left behind, because Nori helped someone. I thought this was a Rings of Power, not the Republican primaries. What the hell are you doing to the hobbits? Whatever it is, stop. Nobody wants you to do this. They don't want you turning the hobbits into some weird cult, or making them selfish, or having a mother tell her child she's not special. Nori says that she thinks she was meant to help this guy, and her mother goes, "Oh, you think you're special? You're not special." What parent says this to their kid, especially over helping someone? Just madness. Meanwhile, Elendil sits down to talk with Isildur and his fake sister Arien. There is no Arien in the books. She was created for the show, and yes, it's probably just so they could have more women in the show. You don't get much out of the scene other than Arien being the know-it-all stereotype, Isildur being the stereotypical wayward son, and Elendil being the gruff father. The scene works, but it's nothing special. Then it cuts to Strong Woman visiting Discount Aragorn in the dungeon. Now, when I started calling Halbrand Discount Aragorn, I did it as a joke, but apparently I was right. He's literally Discount Aragorn. Strong Woman finds an image that matches the symbol on this chain Halbrand wears. It marks him as the missing king of the Southlands, the one they mentioned in the first episode. But Halbrand doesn't want to rule. The weight of the crown is too much for him to bear, especially because of its history. See, his forefathers supported Morgoth, and the same blood flows in his veins. Strong Woman all but says, "You're Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself." Imagine having the rights to The Lord of the Rings, and instead of adapting that story, you make a new one based on 5 pages of content, and then turning it into Lord of the Rings. What are you doing? You have the rights to the story. You can adapt the book. You don't have to make a half-assed copy. You actually have the rights. This is so fucking retarded. This is like having Prince in the studio with you, willing to work on your song, but instead of having the man who's sitting 2 inches from you do the song, you hire someone else to come in and sound like Prince while he's fucking there. Amazon spent $500 million to rip off a story they paid for. This show is a mess, and I can prove it with the rest of the scene. Strong Woman says Discount Aragorn's family ended this conflict, but her family started it, so they should work together. I'm just going to ignore that last part because it makes no sense for her to suddenly want to team up after pushing everyone away for hundreds of years. No, instead I want to talk about this line, "My family started this." What is she referring to? Don't pull from the books, pull from the show. Based on what's in the show, what is she talking about? How did her family start this? Morgoth destroyed the 2 trees, fled to Middle-earth, and the elves, just all of them I guess, followed. There was nary a mention about the Noldor, Feanor, or anything tied to Strong Woman's family. So what does she mean by "my family started this"? See, this only makes sense if you know the lore, which is that Feanor chased after Morgoth to retrieve the Silmarils Morgoth stole, and it's the oath he made his kin swear about getting the Silmarils, that they would suffer no one but their family to have them, and the murder of the Teleri to get ships to get to Middle-earth that set off the events of the First Age, leading to Morgoth's defeat and Sauron's eventual rise. If you're gonna have her say this line, you have to put this info into the show so people will know what she's talking about. You're not being clever by throwing in these lines, and it's not good fan service. It's bad storytelling because your audience can't follow your trail of breadcrumbs because you didn't leave any. They are clueless. And apparently so are the writers, because if all this stuff from the books actually happened, why is Strong Woman in Numenor instead of wandering around Lothlorien? Because canonically, that's where she'd be. The writers are making it so much harder for themselves, and it's embarrassing to watch. Speaking of embarrassing, we get this random scene of Queen Bee telling her father, who they don't show, that he was right about foreseeing Strong Woman's arrival. It's a meaningless reveal because there was no mention of any warning or prophecy of the return of the elves. Writers, you have to set up these things first before you can have the shocking revelation. Speaking of shocking revelation, it turns out that Nori's friend was previously the one at the back of the caravan, revealing that the hobbits are assholes. Why? Because Lenny Henry told us that her entire family was killed in a landslide, but instead of helping her, they punished her by putting her at the back of the group, basically saying she's dead in their eyes. Black Hobbit is always so polite. So when Nori's father can't pull the cart, the caravan just leaves them. No one but Nori's friend even bothers to look back. Very nice friends, Precious. Very nice indeed. However, Meteor Man comes to the rescue, pushing the cart for them. Nori says that this is how they can make it, by helping each other. I think y'all should split off and let the rest of them bitches go on about their business because they do not care about you. The episode ends with Arondir and the other elves trying to make a stand and escape. They kill a bunch of the orcs, so the orcs send out Ed from the Lion King. $250 million budget for this season, and this is what you come up with. Arondir fights off Ed while the old elf breaks his chains and makes a run for it. Arondir tries to do the same, but when he gets out the trench, he sees the old elf get Boromir. The orcs pull him back into the trench and they start repeating this word, Adar. Adar means father, so this figure walking towards Arondir is supposedly the leader, possibly father of the orcs. He looks somewhat elvish, so this might be Sauron in his Anatar form. This was the best and worst episode so far, and it just continues to be embarrassing. I'm struggling to understand why Amazon didn't do what everyone expected and wanted them to do, and just make a Lord of the Rings TV show. Give it the long-form treatment, add in the stuff from the appendices with Arwen where it's chronologically appropriate, and go from there. No one expects you to top Peter Jackson's films. That is a bar that is nigh impossible to reach, so why not try a different approach? Maybe using Tolkien's artwork for the designs. Maybe even bringing in Guillermo del Toro so we can see what vision he had for the Hobbit films. Amazon had an option that would work and give them plenty of material to use for the show. Instead, they chose to create their own story, i.e. rip off The Lord of the Rings, and then do it badly. And it's made worse by House of the Dragon having roughly the same budget and time-skipping story arc, and yet it's so better written, designed, shot, acted, and directed. That was Amazon's competition, and they failed to meet it, like everyone predicted. Now, they still have 5 episodes to fix this. Let's see if they can do... You know I can hear you laughing, right? In the past, I can hear you giggling in the future. It's possible they could fix the show. I mean, it's less probable than Elton John realizing that he doesn't like the D, but it's still possible. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.